So once you have all your numbers entered in, you'll want to test your facility to see how it performs under different economic situations. So we come down here to our stress test tab. And the main focus you'll be looking at is these upper two sections: the comparison of all evaluation scenarios and all the valuations. Over here you can see it brings in all the main numbers that you're going to be needing to compare once the economic situations change. So you get your gross income, your effective gross income, your operating expenses, and then it calculates your NOI and your debt service, and then it comes up with your cash flow you're going to be getting for all these different scenarios. All right, the first column here gives you all the numbers that you entered in for how the property is performing currently. And then the second column calculates the stabilized numbers that you entered in. And this is based off year 2. And then the third column is your pro forma. And these numbers are based off the year that you're going to be refinancing, which is entered in under your deal analysis refi year. And now these last 4 columns, they are going to be your different economic situations. So you'll notice here that they have a superscript. Eval of full is 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, in order to see what each one does, we'll scroll down here to the bottom, and you have these descriptions of what each economic situation covers. So situation 1 is you evaluate it if the facility is full. And usually you'll put this at 100%, but it may be something like 95%. Because if you're using a unit, or if your property manager is using a unit, it won't be calculated in any type of income. In scenario 2 is going to evaluate if the economy collapses. And that is defined that if the rent rates go down by 20% and the vacancies go up by 10%. And those are based off the stabilized values. And you can change these here to make it even worse or better, depending on how you think the facility will perform during an economic collapse. In scenario 3, this will analyze the facility based on what would happen if the market rates of the general area goes up by 50%. And you can see where that takes effect here in the valuations area. This yellow area will add 50% of your purchase price market cap. And then scenario 4 is what happens if the interest rates go up at the time you refinance. And here I put in a default of 1.5%. And you'll see here it adds 1.5% to the interest rate of your purchase price terms. So now let's see what to look for in these different economic situations for the valuations. So under the valuations, there's certain benchmarks we want to hit. So the first row here is our target cash on cash return. And that is the cash on cash return for the year. I usually look for a 10% cash on cash return, but you can change it to a 7 or 8, and you'll see how once the benchmark is met, it'll get rid of the red notification. And then the other next benchmark we look at is our total return on investment. So I usually look for 100%, but sometimes you may want to look for more, like maybe 150%. And you'll see if it doesn't meet that benchmark, the cell itself will turn red to notify you that it's not meeting that benchmark. And so the deal cap rate, you want that to be larger than the market cap rate. And the deal cap rate is calculated off the market value that you purchased it at. So this is telling you how good of a deal that you got. So the higher the deal cap rate, the better the deal that you got. And then our debt service coverage ratio, that is for the banks. Now, the banks usually are wanting a 1.25 value to make sure that you have enough cushion to cover your annual debt service. Now, your sale price or refinance row, the first two columns, that's your sale price. The last 5 columns, that is the cash out value that you'll receive when you refinance. And then the market value shows you what the market value is under the current market cap rate. So let's see how this project performs under each economic scenario. So when we refinance, the market value of the facility is $2.28 million. And when we refinance, we're going to refinance at the value here, loan to value of 65%. And this is the cash out you will be receiving based on our pro forma numbers. Now, if it goes full when we refinance, we come down here and we see our market value has gone up to 3.2 million, and we'll cash out a 1 million. And you can see all these other benchmarks are met. Now, when the economy collapses, our gross rental income will come down and our occupancy rate will come down. So here you see we have a negative cash flow. And if we did refinance, we would have to pay at closing. So in this scenario, we will not refinance. So our debt service will stay the same, but we will still be losing money on a month-by-month basis. Now, if the cap rate falls, which means it actually goes up, that will reduce the value, the market value, when you refinance. In this case, it will also be a negative number, so we won't refinance again. But in this scenario, you're still making money. You're still running a positive cash flow. And if the interest rate goes up when you refinance, we have it going up to 8.5%. That's going to affect your annual debt service. And here you want to look at your cash flow again, and here it's green, so it's still positive. But your debt service coverage ratio is 1.11. It's not meeting the benchmark, so the bank may not let you refinance. And you can go through and change these numbers at the bottom to fit the criteria that you think will happen, and just see how your facility performs in different situations. So once you're comfortable with how the property will perform in different economic situations, we need to come down to the Deal Structure tab. And this is going to help us come up with the correct numbers to propose to the investors and get the numbers to a place where it will be enticing for investors. So if we come to our equity breakdown, this is where it's going to break down between the general partners and the limited partners. And it's going to be based off the buyer equity, that is basically another name for your down payment. So right now we have a structure of the general partners will put in 5% or $25,000. And the remaining amount is going to be 95% to the limited partners. So what you're shooting for is to get a 2x for the limited partners. That makes the deal enticing enough for most investors to take a deeper look at. And you can change these around. You can see how it changes the 2x goal. So if we come in and say the general partners want put down 10%, that actually increases the limited partners' return. Now the bottom portion is the ownership breakdown. The ownership breakdown is how the cash flow is going to be distributed on a monthly basis. So here we have general partners getting 15% of the cash flow and the limited partners getting 85%. And you can change these numbers around also to get close to the 2%. So once you have these numbers figured out to come up to close to 2%, we come over here to the Equity Split tab. And in this tab, it's going to give you a breakdown of how an investor's contribution is going to perform and the dollar values they will be receiving. So here at the top, we're going to do a deal. Under the deal, you can give the investors a 5% preferred return. And what that does is it gives the investors 5% of the cash flow up front guaranteed. And then the remaining cash flow is going to be distributed based off our investor split. So the investors get 80%, which is what we put over here, down here in our ownership breakdown. Investors, the limited partners, are getting 80%, and the operators or general partners are getting 20% of the cash flow income. And then our next variable under the deal is the year to start the distribution. Now, sometimes we don't want to start paying off the cash flow at the beginning because sometimes you're not making money, or you want to keep the capital in reserve just in case something goes wrong during the build out. So here we have our distributions starting in year 3, but you can change that to 4 or whatever year you want to start your distributions. And then down here, our investor scenario, the variable here is what will happen with the amount an investor puts in or contributes to the project. So here we can put in, here it says $20,000 of the investor's contribution is close to 4% of the total capital raised. And here is how they will perform annually. The annual preferred return will be $1,000, which is about 4% of the annual preferred return. And then on a quarterly distribution, they're going to get $250. Now, when they refinance, this scenario, we're doing it in year 5, which you can see highlighted here. The total cash paid out is $18,836, which is this cumulative return. And then the investor return on investment is 94.2%, which is the cumulative cash on cash return. Now, some investors like to look at the internal rate of return, and that's given here at 7%. So based off this $20,000, they're going to get their money back somewhere in year 5 before year 6 is over. And that is the process I go through to underwrite a property.